"Why are you asking?" asked Sirius, confused. Why did she want to need to know this? Only, he's with Mrs. Frobisher now, isn't he? And did seem to love Tonks. Look, forget it, he snapped Sirius. I've already said too much. Keep your nose out. Do me a favor, Hermione. If you have bad news to tell me about Mrs. Frobisher in the future, just don't bother. The fireplace dimmed and Hermione sat in the dull and darkness for a few moments, trying to get her head around what had happened. Sirius. He'd been so horrible. In his father's study, Sirius cursed aloud at himself for his behavior towards her, pulling in frustration his hair and then put the heel of his hand to his head. She was a child who had come to him for help. As he got to his feet and strode towards the door, he thought about the young girl's face damp with tears. She would be sitting in the McGonagall's office breaking her heart over this. Poor child. Almost an adult, he corrected himself. Someone should have made sure they were well out of it. Damn it. Surely she needn't have been taken for safety so soon, not before she'd considered what he had to say to her. Okay, he had Harry's interest at heart, but it wasn't because his alternative was invalid. Why had he taken it out on Hermione, though? He knew it had been cruel, and he'd left a 16-year-old witch sobbing because of his pitiless words. He blocked it out of his mind as flopped onto the damp and dusty bed. Remus would be awake now, and tired. He would be exhausted. Let him sleep, a part of his mind said. Sirius strode out of his father's study, and turned right, not left as if towards his own room, to where his friend would be, and instead rested a hand on his brother's bedroom door handle. Pushing down, a small part of his mind wondered whether he should have told Cecilia Frobisher not to investigate the Horcruxes, not have told her the story all those weeks ago. Would his insistence that it was his imagination have been enough to quell her curiosity? Throwing himself onto his brother's freshly made bed, something Cratchit did with clockwork regularity, and since his trust in him of his blood deed, had been doing with his own, and with the rest of the house, he sealed the door silently and thought about what needed doing. What must be done to put things right? If all went to plan, there would be far more saved than even he dared to dream. But though of that wonderfulness, despite her being only a mole from the outside world, his mind flicked to that morning, when they made breakfast together. The evening before, when he tended Moony. How he had wanted to. And now, before the plan was enacted, she might be. Sirius, do you want ham or cheese sandwiches? Molly Weasley's voice had even managed to penetrate his brother's tomb-like room, and Sirius stared at the door whence the question had been rudely thrust. Swinging his legs off the bed, he strode across the mahogany dark floorboards towards the door, checked that the Colloportus spell had actually worked before silently thinking Alohomora, and he listened as the latch of the door became loose whilst he rattled the handle. Nothing for me, Molly, I'll be down in a minute. Even though it was the middle of the night, Molly Weasley and Bathsheba Bradle were taking it in turns to cater for the order, and though he would have happily shut himself away up here to enable the larger plan to take effect, he pleased the others if he made an appearance once in a while, even if he knew he would have to keep many of his thoughts to himself. The emergency was far from over, and each wizard was becoming more tired, grumpier and less amenable as the days went on. There was so much to do. So much they were doing. Keeping watch over Remus's cottage as the ministry officials scoured it for anything incriminating. An ear to the ground and an eye on the minister to discover information of worth. The recapture of several Death Eaters who claimed to know where Cecilia Frobisher was. All very exhausting, and for Sirius, who had once been so active, so claustrophobic. Penultimately, looking at the decoration in his brother's room, Sirius noted not for the first time that the decor, atmosphere and possessions were still exactly the same as Regulus Black had left it when he went out for the last time of 12, Grimmauld Place. When he went to his doom, corrected Sirius, when he went to tell Voldemort he had double-crossed him. When he essentially committed suicide. If only he had been able to come to Sirius, perhaps he could have helped his brother. But he also knew Regulus. He was a Slytherin through and through. They didn't need help. They didn't accept it. They considered it a sign of weakness to accept help and assistance from anyone, something that had caused Sirius to become suspicious of Snape's willingness to help him develop Harry's potion. It was clear early on after he had deceived her with the potentially lethal Veritaserum, that the wizard had clearly accepted that there was little chance of succeeding in the defeat of Voldemort any other way. Closing the door to Regulus's room, Sirius began to make his way across the becarpeted landing and to the first flight of stairs. The noise below suggested some of the Order had come off watch duties and that some were none too happy about it. He sighed. He'd already replied to Molly and so she was expecting him down, but he would happily have returned to his brother's bedroom and looked at those four walls than have to endure pitiful stories about how hairy it was out there. And he could have spent the time perfecting his own role in the ultimate plan involving Voldemort. Alone. Alone and on your own, that was the Slytherin unofficial motto. Nobody from that house ever did anything unless there was something in it for themselves. Why ask for help when the pride would be all the sweeter for achieving it alone? That was Voldemort's weakness. But to keep people at arm's length and never truly trusting anyone was also his greatest strength. Truly, a Slytherin trait.